In today's episode, let's talk about social listening. So, social listening, social media listening, as we know it, it's going to be a thing of the past, real. And let's talk about why this might be the case. First, let's define what social listening is. It is listening to social media, right? It is listening to conversations. There are really good tools like Talkwalker, Brand24, etc., that you can use to listen for. Does this as well? I've got their shirt on today. Um, And what can you listen for? You can listen for brand mentions, replies to your stuff, mentions of competitors, trends, ideas, general conversations. There's a ton of information that is available to listen to. Humans, us, we're a font of useful data, and these conversations have been used by social media marketers for years now to navigate a landscape, to understand share of voice, which is not my favorite measure, but a lot of people still use it, and just get a feel for what people have to say on any given topic. Now, granted, there's social listening systems have to be fairly robust because there's a lot of crap. There's a lot of people with some less than correct information, uh, very confidently sharing that information online. But in general, people are really good sources of this kind of data that marketers can use to calibrate their efforts to come up with product ideas to address market needs. So a thing of the past. It sounds like it's not because social listening's it. Social listening is more valuable than ever, and that's why it's going to go away. The culprit of this is models in general. Here's why. Companies that make these massive AI models need data. OpenAI, Google, Meta, uh, Anthropic, they all need data. They're starving for data, and they're trying to buy up as much of it as possible. I saw a news article not too long ago. One company was approaching Photo Bucket. For those folks who were on the internet in the early 2000s, you remember Photo Bucket. This company was like, "Hey, you've got a lot of labeled data. We want to buy the license to that archive." And I'm thinking, I remember all the trash people were sharing on PhotoBucket. Do you really want that in your model? But the answer is yes. These companies are starving for more data, and many of them are concerned of running afoul of intellectual property rights for laws using data. So they're trying to, as much as they can, to get this data. And the social media companies, social networks, they don't have to ask permission. They don't have to ask permission to use the data because in the terms of service for pretty much every social network in existence, there's a terms of service. And in that terms of service, it says things like you give them the right to create derivative works of what you submit on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, you name it. An AI model is a derivative work. An AI model is a derivative work of content we share. And we agreed to this when we signed up for Facebook and Instagram and so on and so forth. Think about all of the content that we have created for these companies, right? Microsoft bought LinkedIn, and that is obviously going to feed models like the ones that Microsoft is building, OpenAI is building. Twitter has its decades of data to feed it the Grok model. Meta has Facebook and Instagram and Threads and WhatsApp to feed their Llama models. Google has YouTube and Gmail, their search catalog, Google Photos. Yeah, every time you put a photo in Google Photos, you're helping train their model. Google Podcasts, you name it, to feed the editors. Export their social network data fundamentally undermines their ability to make generative AI models, to make money on their generative models, right? So we've seen in the last, couple of years, some really big throttling. Twitter just outright canceled its API, except for the enterprise version, to access their API because closed the doors on a whole bunch of stuff. Meta recently announced the installation of its CrowdTangle service that has been in existence since 2015. That used to give marketers access to raw data from Facebook and Instagram. No more. That door is closed. Microsoft shut down most of the APIs for LinkedIn years ago. And has taken people to court for scraping LinkedIn. Already has many safeguards in place to prevent people from scraping data and crawling data. For example, if you try to scrape a bunch of YouTube data, blocked, and they may be temporary or permanent. Don't ask me how I know. Um, Basically, if a social network or any service that relies on user-generated content um, has data at scale from us, expect them to lock it down. Expect them to lock it down. And that also means locking it out of more and more social listening tools, right? These companies recognize the value of that data and they don't want to give away the little gold mine that they are sitting on. So what does this mean for social media marketers? In all likelihood, you'll be able to keep grabbing data, right? When you post to LinkedIn, you will get information about that, or Instagram, whatever. You'll be able to get your information. But the days of endless buffets of broad social media data that is not yours, data about that competitors are posting, data that random people are posting, those days are coming to a close rapidly as social networks grasp the value of their data and either sell it or make their own models from it. But either way, they're going to put up as many walls as possible to prevent other people from taking it. And it's their right. That's their right. It's their data. Well, it's our data, but we've given it to them. So what do you take away from this? If you're a social media marketer, expect it to get harder to get raw data. You may have to come up with your own system for doing that. If you have some skilled programmers or you're skilled at using generative AI to write software, you may have to write some workarounds that look at narrow slices and can simulate a human being using a social network. That probably does, in many cases, violate a terms of service. So be aware that if you do that, you may get kicked off of that social network and banned from it. Be aware that that's probably the direction many things are going to go. That also means that if you have access to data now, you should be hoarding it as much as you can, because you may need to make your own models at some point just to be able to predict what happens on a social network once that data gets locked down. And if you are a truly enterprising person, you might just make your own social network. Right? Maybe it's not huge. Maybe it's just a community on Discord, or maybe you clone a fork, a Mastodon, and turn that into something. But you might, if you truly want continued access to data from your audience, you may have to build your own social network to do that. For example, we run the community analytics for marketers. It's the Slack group. If you go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, you can join it. In that Slack group, as an administrator, I can do an administrative export of that data and archive it, and then I can use that data if I need to. Trust Insights owns that community. We own that information, and so the conversations that people have in there, we can use to triangulate and to understand our audience better. You got to own that data. You got to own that network to do that. So, some thinking for you to do about social media listening. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you want to know when new videos are available, hit the bell button to be notified as soon as new content is live.